Today we're going to talk about chapter 3.5, which is on specific heat. This is going to be a concepts video. Then there's going to be at least one other video on specific heat that has the calculations. So for specific heat, we understand that each object takes a different amount of energy to change temperature. So the amount of energy that it takes to heat up the ice cube is different than the amount of energy that takes to heat up the glass. And that's the idea behind specific heat. If we take a look at another example, heating an aluminum pan full of water, the pan gets hot faster than the water, even though they absorb the same amount of energy. Now, for specific heat, we're usually talking about the amount of heat that's required to raise 1 gram of a substance by 1 degree Celsius. So, for example, let's look at aluminum, which has a specific heat of 0.897, and then silver, which has a specific heat of 0.235. First of all, let's talk about the units. The units for specific heat capacity, let me change this to red. The units for specific heat capacity are joules per gram degree Celsius. We know that joules measures energy. Grams measures mass. Degrees Celsius measures temperature. So this is literally the number of joules, the energy required to heat 1 gram 1 degree Celsius. So for aluminum, it takes 0.897 joules to heat 1 gram 1 degree Celsius. For silver, it takes 0.235 joules to heat 1 gram 1 degree Celsius. So what does a high specific heat capacity mean? A high specific heat capacity means that it takes more energy to heat up 1 gram of that substance 1 degree Celsius. So again, in the example that we just gave with aluminum and silver, aluminum takes 0.897 joules, so this is for aluminum, 0.897 joules to heat 1 gram 1 degree Celsius. Silver takes 0.235 joules to heat 1 gram 1 degree Celsius. So it's going to take more energy to heat up that aluminum. It's going to take less energy to heat up silver. So what does a low specific heat capacity mean? Not as much energy is needed to heat the substance. Now notice for specific heat capacity, we're talking about a very specific amount, 1 gram. So what does 0.452 joules per gram degree Celsius mean? That means that it takes 0.452 joules of energy to heat 1 gram of the substance 1 degree Celsius. Okay, so we're going to make the temperature change by 1 degree Celsius. Now, here is the equation for specific heat capacity. Q equals mc delta T. Q, that is heat or energy. So that's the number of joules that is either going into the substance or coming out of the substance. M, that's mass. And mass is measured in grams. G. Delta T, delta, that triangle there is delta. Delta always means change in. So this is the change in temperature. Now to calculate that, it's always going to be the final temperature minus the initial temperature. And you'll see that when we do some sample problems. And finally, C, that is specific heat capacity. Oops. So that's the equation that we're going to use to calculate specific heat capacity, heat, mass, or change in temperature. In the next video, we'll do some sample problems.